There are three things to be shared. The first is an anecdote of Mullah Nasruddin that has a profound intimation to it. And that's the story of when he died and he was placed in his coffin, and they had a wake when everyone cried and wailed and keened. But then they closed the coffin lid and the pallbearers carried him on the road to the cemetery ground to be buried. But they hadn't gone very far when they came to a crossroads, and no one could decide which road led to the cemetery ground. So they placed his coffin on the ground and huddled around together to try to make a decision, when suddenly the coffin lid opened. Mullah Nasruddin sat up and said, "The cemetery ground is that way." So they closed the lid and carried him off to be buried. And the second thing is that over these last days, occasionally there's been a very bold statement made, which was not usual in the way of storytelling. But that bold statement was that the greatest illusion of all is love and light. But it's dared at this time to make another bold statement, and that is that the greatest illusion of all and the bane of mankind is the thought that there is good and evil. And perhaps you'll remember the story of King Solomon. Now, King Solomon, it was known, knew the language of the birds and the animals. He had a magic carpet that could take him to any place in creation. He also had power over the winds. But along with that, King Solomon had a ring on his finger that had engraved, etched in it, those letters that spelt the name of God and gave him powers of which he would never speak. But King Solomon had a very great question that bothered him. And that question was, what is the nature of illusion? And King Solomon knew that the king of the demons, Asmadeus, knew the answer to this question. And as it happened, King Solomon had captured the king of the demons, Asmadeus, put him in chains and placed him in a dungeon in the deep dark recesses of his palace. But this question ate at King Solomon, so there came a time when he could not resist bringing Asmadeus out of the dungeon, bringing him up before him and putting the question to him. What is the nature of illusion? And Asmadeus responded, "I cannot tell you the answer to your question until you remove my chains and take off the ring that you have on your finger that inscribes the name of God." Now at this time, there was no question about it. King Solomon had the chains removed from Asmadeus, and he took off the ring that he had on his finger. Immediately, Asmadeus took this ring and threw it with all his might, and it flew a great distance, where it landed in a vast ocean. And then King Solomon himself felt himself being lifted up and thrown also a great distance, where he found himself washed up on a far distant shore, no longer wearing his royal robes, just the tattered remains of having been buffeted by the sea. And there is a story that goes on, that's been told before, of how King Solomon had adventures. He was taken up by fishermen. He learned the ways of fishing. And then he found himself in the palace of a king. And the story goes on until he arrives at a place where he was given a quest to find a stone, a precious stone, to be found in a cave somewhere. And he found the cave, and he found the stone. But just as he was about to fulfill that quest, to bring that gem back to the princess who had requested it, a wave washed into the cave and washed him out into the great and endless ocean, where a leviathan came and spat out his ring. When this ring was placed on his finger again, King Solomon found himself back in his palace, recognizing that he had never left it, standing before Asmadeus, the king of the demons, and absolutely recognizing and knowing that he now knew the answer to his question, the nature of illusion. Asmadeus, the king of the demons, now released from his bondage, and having fulfilled his task, disappeared, never to return. The greatest bane of mankind is the illusion that there is good and evil. And the third thing is that over these coming days, in the time that is left, and whenever it is possible to do so, there will be the sharing of anecdotes, which we could say will be like beads that you will have to string together to recognize that here there is a story, there is a lineage, there is a purpose, there is a mandate. And whether we've come together just recently or whether we've been together for years, we have to recognize that in coming together we have woven a tapestry that is almost complete. And that tapestry fits in to the great purpose of life and existence itself. And in the possibility that you can string these beads together, you have the chance to be able to recognize what an integral unique and amazing part you play in weaving that tapestry that fits in to the greater matrix, if you can call it that, of existence and its purpose. Those anecdotes will be such things as, how did the golden scarf come to be? What was the purpose of being with Divine Mother? Why were we led to go to Myanmar, where we met the Burmese mother and brought together the devotional lives and the lives of knowledge and experience, and our meetings with the mountain gods in Kota Kinabalu? But these beads will be for you to string together, to understand your own story and recognize your place in it, calling it a tapestry woven in our lifetimes that fits into the purpose of existence and the purpose of existence.